Here's me 4 years ago, and look how happy I am. 8K TVs had arrived, the future looked bright. But fast forward to 2025 and, well, this is me now. I mean, what happened? So what is the state of 8K TVs now? Can you see a difference? Should you buy one? And if 8K isn't the future of TVs, then what is? Because you could be forgiven for thinking 8K TVs were all but dead given how little coverage there is of them and how few new models launch each year. So was it just a fad, like 3D TVs and curved TVs? Because these 8K TVs represent less than 1% of worldwide TV sales. It's a tiny, tiny market. And so not enough demand meant they were just too expensive to make and buy. So that's why most manufacturers gave up on 8K, leaving really just Samsung and to a lesser extent LG as the main proponents of 8K. At least here in the UK. Hisense and some of the brands do have 8K models in other regions around the world, but it's still not commonplace. So are there any new 8K TVs actually being released? Well, yes, but pretty much only by Samsung. They've announced 2 8K Neo QLED TVs for 2025. We've got the QN990F and the QN900F, boasting new processors and 2000 nit mini LED panels. But looking more to the future, Hisense demoed its 116UX RGB mini LED 8K TV, and if that wasn't big enough, they also have a 136-inch 8K micro LED. Plus Samsung are promising the ultimate RGB micro LED TV as well. But they're all far too big for most houses unless you live in a big American mansion. They're also going to be very expensive and there's no release date for them yet. But let's take a step back. What actually is 8K and why does it exist? 8K refers to the resolution, so 7680 by 4320. That's 33 million pixels, 4 times more than the 8 million pixels you get with 4K. And it's this density of pixels, aka pixels per inch or PPI, which is so much higher with 8K, so you get an even sharper, more detailed image. Whether it's native 8K content or even upscaled, and it means you can have a really, really big screen without losing as much clarity, so they're great for larger rooms. So while technically an 8K TV should look, well, up to 4 times sharper than a 4K TV, and I'm going to show you a whole bunch of side-by-sides here, the reality is a bit more complicated, but whether you have native 8K content or upscaled content to 8K, it should, broadly speaking, look sharper and better than a 4K TV. Because all that upscaling, that requires some very beefy processors and very advanced upscaling. This guy here is the Samsung QN900D. It's their flagship 2024 8K TV, launched just last year at a little under $7 grand, which was at least 50% more than an equivalent 75-inch 4K flagship, at least here in the UK. And it's not like you have a ton of choice either. Really, it's only Samsung that consistently releases at least 2 new 8K TV models every year. And if you want 8K OLED, your only option is the 2-year-old LG Z3, which starts at about 15 grand, or about 25,000 for the 88-inch. Ouch. By the way, this TV is about half the price that it was when it launched. Especially when you go for cutting-edge 8K TVs, the price drops are just ridiculous. It's always worth buying either a year-old model or just waiting maybe 6 months after launch to get some big discounts. And the other issue is there just isn't that much to watch in 8K. Most streaming services target 1080p or 4K. I mean, 8K would just be a ridiculous amount of bandwidth and data, and 4K Blu-rays are just that, 4K. To be fair, a lot of Hollywood movies and high production video companies do shoot in 8K, but that's not to give you 8K, that's for them to be able to edit their scene and punch into a 4K crop without losing too much information. So as a tool for videographers and directors, it makes sense to shoot at 8K, but very rarely are you going to end up with 8K video that you and I can watch. And that's also because 8K cameras are expensive and there aren't that many of them. You also need a really powerful computer to edit in 8K and the file sizes are huge. Plus, while nearly all smartphones can record in 4K, only a handful can manage 8K 30. There is 8K content on YouTube, but it's mainly just tech demos, like these travel and animal videos. And depending on how they're produced, and also with the YouTube video compression, it can often look almost identical to 4K. And also, a lot of what is listed as 8K actually isn't. However, 8K TVs can of course upscale. It's not as impressive as native 8K content, but it can still be noticeably sharper than a regular 4K TV, and it's probably the biggest usable benefit of owning an 8K. Because the final issue is that the jump between 4K and 8K can be hard to notice at sizes less than 75 or 85 inches. In fact, my buddy Caleb over at Digital Trends put together this table showing how you have to sit uncomfortably close, at least twice as close, with 8K versus 4K to really notice the difference. And as someone who uses both OLED and QD OLED TVs regularly, going back to a mini LED when you're spending this kind of money on a high-end flagship TV just feels kind of wrong. I would love an OLED or a QD OLED or a micro LED 8K TV, but they just don't exist outside of the LG from a couple of years ago, which costs as much as a family car. But let's just park all that stuff around, value for money. Is it worth it? Does the fact we have an 8K resolution and all that beefy upscaling make these TVs better than a regular 4K? Now, the only way I can capture 8K video is with my Galaxy S25 Ultra. Shot at 8K 30 with log, and I've done the color correct, playing back natively on the 8K TV. I've also got it running on the 4K here, so there's no upscaling to worry about, no fancy magicry behind the scenes, magicry. But the question here is, can I see a difference in the detail based purely on the resolution? And the answer is yes, mostly in very fine detail, particularly text, the edges of things. Also like my eye and the sort of my fine detail with my hair and things like that. Generally speaking, just watching the clips, it's difficult to tell. But if you pause it on the right scene when you have a very sharp, in focus, close up, well exposed subject, you can see a difference. Like here with my eyes, the definition on this tiki mug, the PlayStation text here is noticeably sharper. I mean, it's 4 times the resolution. It should be sharper. And this is shot, as I say, natively at 8K. How often are you ever going to do that? And then, watch it back on an 8K? I don't know. The definition is there. The trouble is, unless you come to my house and stand right here and look at these side by side, it's incredibly hard to portray the difference. Because even though I shot that at 8K and it's playing back in 8K, I'm recording this on a 4K camera. And even if I was shooting in 8K, chances are you're watching this back on a 4K or Full HD or Quad HD screen. Hopefully I can still just about show you the difference in this video, but please understand, this is very hard to show. Okay, this is best case scenario. We've turned off DLSS, turned off frame generation. This is a native resolution. I don't know if it's 4K or 8K. Glasses are on, I'm right in front of it. Okay, Pete, change the resolution. This looks sharper. I'm gonna say this is now 8K.
Yeah, it is.
Okay. Okay, great. So 10 inches away, yes, I can see the difference. Let's get back to the sofa and see if I can see it from a reasonable distance. I'm gonna get shouted at in the comments because I'm always wrong about these things. I mean, already I think that's 8K. But let's switch it and see if I was right. Okay. If there's a perceived difference, it's minimal at best from this distance. I'm going to say this is 4K and the one before was 8K.
That's correct.
Okay. The frustrating part is I almost want 8K to be a significant upgrade because I want to go out and spend ludicrous amounts of money and get excited about new technology and utilize DLSS 4 with multi-frame gen and play Cyberpunk in 8K and all these things because I'm a tech nerd and I always want that next thing that's better. A few inches away from the screen, native, 8K, no DLSS, Cyberpunk, so there's no upscaling happening here. Yes, I could see a small difference, maybe sort of 10% from a reasonable sitting distance. And most people will probably sit further away from a 75-inch TV. It's just not perceivably better. All right, next stop, 8K YouTube content, which I also compared by jumping between 8K and 4K streams, so the difference in the TVs and their processing wasn't a factor. And if I watch some super high quality content from a specialist 8K creator, it can be glorious, especially if it's filmed in the higher bit depth color that 8K is capable of. Up close, the sharper detail and reduced aliasing can be obvious. But take a step back or two, it's much trickier to spot the difference, especially when there's lots of motion. Another issue is that a lot of 8K YouTube videos have a lot of smeary compression artifacting, meaning I can barely see the difference next to 4K. You know it's serious when these guys come on. So let's talk about upscaling. We've done a whole bunch of tests watching YouTube videos, really high quality polished ones. We watched a whole bunch of Is It Cake? Just for the research, not because we wanted to on Netflix, high quality production shows. And also we've got a live stream of BBC News right here. And what we've established, having them both side by side, is that the upscaling does make a difference between a 4K and 8K TV, particularly on lower quality or where you've got more compressed or streamed content like this. So clearly, I don't know how well this will come across on the camera, but across the ticker tape here, with the text, the time, people's faces, edges, the usual stuff where you'd see more detail, even at a reasonable sitting distance from the screen, I can see more detail on the 8K, which is a shame because I love this 4K TV, but it is noticeably sharper. However, when we went for the really high quality fancy HDR YouTube videos and some Netflix shows, the difference was a lot less pronounced. So it does suggest the worse the quality of the content you're watching, the better, the more significant improvement you'll see on an 8K TV over a 4K. I hope that makes sense. It is hard though, when you have two different TVs, two different manufacturers, one's OLED, one's mini LED. Obviously the best scenario here would be that I get a Samsung QD OLED with an 8K resolution, but they don't exist. And therein lies the problem. Even if there is a higher resolution that in some content you can perceivably see an improvement with 8K, you're either paying a lot more or you're just missing out on some key features like a higher refresh rate or OLED or MLA panels that can get brighter potentially depending on the model you go for. Kind of like the megapixel race with camera phones, resolution and sharpness, while important, isn't everything. But what about 8K gaming? Well, it is now much more achievable than it used to be because you can buy, I don't know, an RTX 5090 for a couple of grand and then get some playable frame rates with high settings. I think we might be the first people to try Cyberpunk with a 5090 on an 8K TV. In terms of FPS, we're getting about 20, natively that is, without any of the DLSS or multi-frame upscaling. Turn that good stuff on, and it goes up to about 160 frames per second, so very playable, assuming you take advantage of the new DLSS features. However, this is a 60 Hz TV. All 8K TVs are 60 Hz. They're limited by, the panel, also the bandwidth of the ports. So it actually made sense to drop the performance DLSS to balanced, giving us about 100 frames per second, and that's a nice sort of level for during combat, during gameplay, still getting a very smooth 60. Because while this looks very good, gaming at 60 FPS with a 5090 feels a bit wrong. Look at that. That latency is almost double what I've experienced on this same card, on this same PC running on a 4K TV or monitor. 100 milliseconds. Turning off DLSS multi-frame gen will improve that, but it's more than playable multi-frame gen on a 4K display. I've, as I say, done it a lot. So I'll be honest, that latency, together with the motion handling, the response time of this TV in 8K, and also being 60 Hz, it really does take away from that gaming experience, even with the latest cards. The other option, of course, is the PS5 Pro, and while this is the only console that supports 8K games, it's only supported in a handful of games. I'm playing GT7 here in 8K on the PS5 Pro, and yeah, it is actually noticeably sharper, especially when you're up close. The fine detail in the cockpit and the text on screen, and it's actually quite impressive that a game that looks this good has an 8K mode running at 60 frames per second, even if it is relying an awful lot on PSSR AI upscaling. Although I couldn't really see any difference playing No Man's Sky in 8K on the PS5 Pro, so in some games, if you look closely, there is an improvement there, but none of it's going to blow you away. We're doing this testing here side by side, and we're thinking, what 8K content is there? There's YouTube videos that, a handful of demos, tech demos that are in 8K, but even then you're limited by compression and export settings, what the depth, the color depth of it. You've got 8K native gaming, of course, which does away with upscaling and is possibly the most true form of 8K, but then it's a 60 Hz TV and there's issues around latency, response time, going back to the panel quality difference between them. Is it a better gaming experience? No is the answer. So then mostly we're relying on upscale content from your Netflix and broadcast TV and YouTube videos, which is fine. And obviously the technology has improved gen on gen, but so has the 4K upscaling and picture modes and AI modes on regular 4K TVs to the point where they've overtaken the quality, for the most part, of an 8K TV. Yes, it can't quite match the resolution, but with AI sharpness enhancements and processing and just the panel quality and the brightness. And actually, we're doing some testing here where, for a moment, I dropped the brightness on this LG, and I thought, oh, hang on a minute, I really can see a difference now. Match the brightness again. And I was like, oh, maybe not. There's so many variables here that to just say that 8K TV is better because it's noticeably sharper is almost impossible to say. So what's next for 8K TVs? Well, I don't know, if I'm honest. It really is going to come down to chicken or the egg. Either the cost of manufacturing the panels comes down, or there's more content produced, or both, and then more of us go out and buy 8K TVs because they're cheaper and there's more to watch in them. That's naturally how things progress. But we just haven't seen that with 8K like we did with, going to full HD and 4K. In fact, what we've seen is just more development in regular 4K TVs. Higher brightnesses, better HDR, better gaming modes with high refresh rates, improved viewing angles, the upscaling to 4K, and also the processors behind the scenes making 4K look even better. Basically, everything else has got better except the resolution. What we really need is more competition. We need Hisense and TCL to come back in with some cheap, affordable, big 8K TVs. But my conclusion is, while yes, in some situations you can see an appreciable benefit with an 8K resolution TV, particularly with upscale content, but it's just not worth it right now. You're much better off paying a whole lot less money and getting a really good 4K TV than one of these. But I won't stop you, and if you can find a really good deal on maybe one of the older models, then, go for it. You'll have a fantastic experience, and 8K is superior, but it's just not worth it. But what do you reckon? Are we ever going to see 8K replace 4K? Let me know what you make of this in the comments below. If you've got any questions, drop a comment. I'll do my best to answer them. And if you found this useful, a cheeky like and subscribe would be fantastic. Thank you so much for watching, guys, and I'll see you next time right here on the Tech Chat.